One of the last and very important parts of reclaiming that pillar of reclamation, is that you need to understand what happens to your backup systems when you are in a state of chaos and or survival, when you need to come back to stability in the center. We have to acknowledge the fact that our body is pretty incredible. The analogy I like is that of a computer. So if your nervous system is like the motherboard and it's sensing the environment at all times, then you have other backup systems that step in. So when the motherboard is sensing chaos, survival, stress of any type, again, these types of inputs don't have to be emotional. They could be overtraining for the athlete. They could be environmental exposures. But when that is sensed by the motherboard, by your nervous system, one of the number one backup systems is your hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis, the HPA axis. And what happens is cortisol gets pumped out to try to dampen the response and support your system, but that ends up over time becoming an issue. You stop responding to it and the whole axis gets dysregulated. When that happens, we see a lot of the signs of chronic stress, weight gain, anxiety, and many, many more cravings for sugar, sleepless nights. So you want to pay attention to your adrenal axis, to that HPA axis, to try to get it back in balance. And a lot of times it involves knowing some details. Like, have you been so taxed for so long that you don't have access to any cortisol? Your adrenals are flatlined. Then you may need support with a glandular type of supplement. If you're somebody who is wired but tired, you may need that plus adaptogenic herbs. If you're somebody who lives off of adrenaline and you think it's great, but you're not sleeping and you're soon going to crash, we all know that path, then maybe you need predominantly these adaptogenic herbs like rhodiola or ashwagandha, and there's many more specific types of ginseng. So researching and understanding and testing that HPA axis is going to be really important so that you know how to support that overused and overworked and potentially inappropriate backup system that needs to come online for you to progress in a more healthy way into healing and repair. And remember, when your cortisol's thrown off, I like to describe it kind of like the three-legged stool, where you have your adrenals, your cortisol, you have your thyroid, and you have your hormones. This is men and women, and I talk a lot about this because whether you're focused on perimenopause or menopause or low testosterone, many people go into the weeds of supporting just that hormonal aspect, which is very important, don't get me wrong, but if you don't look at the whole picture, you're missing the point, which is this three-legged stool where the adrenals have been so taxed because of an overwrought nervous system. The other two legs have to hold the stool up, so they burn out faster. So whether you are a male who has low testosterone, that we're seeing that in younger and younger ages, absolutely testosterone can help, but you want to restore the HPA axis and go back to reclaiming your nervous system so that you either don't need to stay on the testosterone long term or so that the testosterone you're taking continues to work. And we see that in women as well. In women, it is predominantly a loss of progesterone. And what happens is we'll see PMS, a lot of perimenopausal symptoms, exhaustion, sleep problems, many, many more that happen from low progesterone or estrogen dominance that is seen often in this state. Getting those hormones balanced, and if you're menopausal, potentially going on a full hormonal replacement, is going to be really important because that stool leg needs support so that it stops pulling on the others. And lastly, your thyroid. So many doctors and so many people check just one basic thyroid number in the blood work. We know there's a lot more involved, and that things like conversion of T4 to T3 or T3 production in and of itself are what gets suppressed when that stool leg, those stool legs are compromised. So the overactive nervous system, the HPA axis dysregulation, then you are unable to make enough thyroid to feel good, and you start having symptoms related to low thyroid. You may even be taking thyroid medication, doing it diligently. You may have been on thyroid meds for a long period of time, and then all of a sudden it stops working. Why? Is it not getting inside the cell? What's happening? And that can be, again, the bigger picture of where these backup systems have had to be in play for so long, and you can't just replace one of them. So you can't just take adrenal support if you're in perimenopause with a very low progesterone feeling horrible. You need progesterone as well. Or if your thyroid that you were once taking is no longer working and don't address that, and you try to just fix your adrenals or your nervous system, that's not likely to work either. So getting what I've found as a functional medicine doc for decades at this point, and in my own body, is that if you want to adequately heal, you want to go down a functional medicine path where you work on your gut and your microbiome, and you work on viruses and your immune system, and you detoxify, these great things that many people are focusing on, you are unlikely to get the results that you want, expect, pay for, if you don't get your core compensatory mechanisms back online. So those backup systems need to be addressed in reclaim phase for you to adequately go on to heal and eventually to optimize, perform, and transcend. And we have ways of both testing these systems as well as replacing them, whether it is with actual hormones, which often is needed in both the female and male hormone and the thyroid realm, but there are also a lot of natural supplements and things that can be done. And many times I have found, which is very exciting, is that as patients heal, as we get them, let's say it this way, as patients reclaim and then go on and we work on healing and getting out infections, toxins, and get the gut healthy and all the metabolic stuff, getting their foundation stabilized, they don't need those hormones anymore, or they very often need less and less and less. And that's amazing, because that's what our bodies are supposed to do, is be able to compensate, help each other out, and not rely on more aggressive support. So remember, in Reclaim, just to summarize, you're going to work on reclaiming your nervous system, most important. That is step one. Making sure that your foundations are stabilized, everything from your circadian biology to what you're eating, sleeping, how you're moving, how you're hydrating. Then getting those doors, the things that have been impacted, which is the cell membranes, the castle gates, and the backup systems, getting those all back online when we give the body what it needs, when we give it that basic support, and we reclaim it, we can more easily and more successfully move right into healing the issues that have been bothering us.